Hi, my name is Bill Boissenault, and on behalf of the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us as we continue our time travel back through the 50 years of the Academy. 1974, the Orthopedic Section was officially approved by the APTA, so this being 2024 marks a big birthday for the Academy, its 50th year. The Academy has undertaken a number of activities to celebrate the past, honor the past, including developing a timeline of historical events. And the purpose of these conversations is to highlight events that occurred that not only impacted the Academy itself, but also the profession, so on a wider basis. And the purpose of these couch conversations is to look at those events that, again, shape the Academy, shape the profession. And we're going to do so through the eyes of three individuals who played key roles in the formative years of the Academy and also blazed the trail for women to assume leadership roles within the Academy. So it's my pleasure, my honor to introduce Babette Sanders, Jan Richardson, and Nancy White. Babette, amongst other things, chaired the Illinois Orthopedic Study Group in the late 1970s. This was an initiative undertaken by the section to help reach the grassroots. Babette also served as treasurer from 1977 to 1981. Jan Richardson, began her role within the section/academy as program committee, which was really the education committee for the section back then. So she served in this role from 1982 to 86. She became president-elect in 1987 and then served 2 terms as president through 1992. And part of her role as section president was to serve as the section delegate to APTA's House of Delegates during her years as president. And last but not least, Nancy White. Nancy began her role within the Academy serving on the practice committee in 87, 88, then moved to the education committee where she served as co-chair for 5 years. And then from 1995 to 2001 served as vice president of the Academy. And part of her role as VP was to serve as the awards committee chair during her term as vice president. So what makes this conversation special for me personally is that I had the privilege of serving under and serving with 3 of you over the years. And I can't thank you enough for carving time out of your busy lives, vacations and work lives to do this conversation today. So first question, and Babette, we'll start with you since you have seniority amongst the group. In the early days, the section leadership was almost entirely made up of men. So how did you get involved in this section and who mentored you in the realm of assuming leadership positions within this section?
Thanks, Bill. I was reflecting about that this morning, a lot as I was thinking about this discussion. And when I think about how far back I go in terms of my involvement with the section, it really was, I think I was probably one of the very early women, as you say. And I think that I can go back and say to the people who were my faculty when I was in PT school, who were all involved in APTA, I remember sitting at some ortho section meeting where they were looking for candidates or people willing to serve, and somebody kind of gave me the elbow and said, you could do that. And I was, I guess, naive enough at that point to say, oh, sure, no problem. I'd be happy to do that. And I think that's kind of how a lot of us got involved, is the elbow in the ribs sitting at a meeting that somebody planted the seed. And so I did agree to run for treasurer and served in that role for a number of years, and really grateful for that opportunity, because when I think of some of the leaders in the field that I got to know through the orthopedic section, Stanley Paris, Sandy Burkhart, who's no longer with us, Dick Earhart, Jim Gould. I'm privileged to say that I served and worked with some of those individuals. I'm not sure at that stage that I really thought as much about the fact that I was a woman in a man's world. I think somehow that matured. I think I saw myself as a young PT, what we now call emerging leader, looking to make my path in the association. I think it's through those very early experiences that I really learned to, what's the right word? Embrace the fact that I was a woman charting a path in leadership within the association. And the board, the treasurer's role at that point, I remember balancing the checkbook. I mean, when I think about that now, we didn't have staff. We all did our own work. I can remember board meetings in somebody's hotel room. We didn't have other rooms. But out of those early meetings, some really wonderful concepts that have carried the Ortho Academy now, but APTA and the profession forward very much. So.
Very good. So you went to a meeting and somebody elbowed you. I think probably we all experienced that along the way. Jan, how about you?
Well, similar to Babette, it was being in the right place at the right time. And from a mentor perspective, I was very fortunate after graduating from University of Pennsylvania physical therapy program to take my first position as a physical therapist with Bob Richardson, who at that time had been president of the Pennsylvania chapter and was very involved with the American Physical Therapy Association on the board, and instilled in all of the staff that we had an obligation to give back to the profession and serve and be very diligent about that, because we had gleaned from those in our past, and now we needed to contribute to the present and move on to mentor for the future. So I happened to be at a seminar, and at that time speakers still had slide projectors. And I was sitting in the Orthopedic Section room at the back of the room. The chairman of the program committee came up to me and said one of their members had become ill and she had to go somewhere else. Would I consider turning the lights off and on for the speaker, as the speaker was ready to do their presentation and then afterward to take questions? And I said I would be glad to do that. So during that 2-hour presentation, I worked the lights back and forth, and afterward she came up to me and said, would you like to be on the program committee? So it was, again, being in the right place at the right time. From a mentor perspective, having been on the program committee, I had the opportunity to meet Carolyn Wadsworth, who was the first Ortho Section female president, and became very engaged with the section from that perspective, as well as, again, being mentored in what leadership was all about, contribution was all about, and team building was all about from Bob Richardson.
Yeah. So Jan, you passed the light switch test.
I did.
And the slide carousel test, probably.
Yes, that as well. Yes. Yeah. Nancy, how about you?
So it's fun to think back on all these times. So my first clinical position was in the Chicago area in Lake Forest, and I was actually in Babette's study group, and there was a lot of energy around manual therapy and orthopedics and all of that. So I was part of that when Sandy would come and talk to us and Dick Earhart would come. And it was a lot of fun. And my roommate and one of my work colleagues were in the Northwestern manual therapy program as well. So all we did was go around the country and take manual therapy courses in our vacation time. And I was at a class once, and Helen Price was also one of my roommates who was involved early, and we were in some manual therapy class, and Carolyn Wadsworth was in the class, and So someone said, "Oh, Carolyn's looking for women to become involved with Orthopedic Section because she was the president." And so we talked to her, and somehow I got connected, and she gave my name to Bob Dusinger, who was coming in as the president. And I got involved in some, I guess that was a practice committee, and we were doing this little, trying to figure out what the role of PTAs were. And there were people who had very definite opinions, and it sort of opened the doors to some of that. But I got involved early on, and I never stopped until I left to go to work for APTA. It was a wonderful group of colleagues, but I got to know very quickly Jan and Annette, who were involved with the program committee, and it was so clinical, and it was so structured, and it was very sort of down my alley. And so I got involved with that and really loved that. And then started working with Bill when he was the president and I was the vice president, and we worked along the way. So just lots of people who have stayed with the section, stayed involved, that touched me along the ways. But I appreciate those early days in Chicago with the Northwestern program and all of the ways that they was able to influence me. So thank you all.
Yeah, good stories, neat stories. As women in primarily a male-dominated organization, I mean, did you face any bias or pushback as you tried to get involved during your leadership roles? And Nancy, maybe I'll start with you, and we'll work back.
You start with me, okay. I was sort of clueless about those things. I might have had it, but not noticed it. But I do think that with organizations, it's, friendships form, and sometimes they're perceived as being cliques, and sometimes it's just a comfort level of having those groups. But there was a lot of, probably even more than male, female, a lot of sort of, panache and cachet to the international connections, and people who knew Le Grimsby, and the people who knew the New Zealanders. And there was these sort of groups there that were, perceived sometimes to be sort of exclusive because of who they were, and they were, predominantly male. And I think it was visible. I don't know how that is now, but I just, sort of found a place that I felt like I fit and showed up and did my work and made lots of friends that way, and never felt that I was being pushed aside. So,
Jan, how about you?
I agree with Nancy. At that time, we didn't really think of who was male and who was female. We thought about who was on the team and what contributions did those people bring to the team. And there were some people who had skill sets as visionaries. There were others who were looking at the financial aspects and the stability of the section. And then there were those who could implement plans of care, and others who could then assess the outcome. So all of us brought something to the table. We functioned more collaboratively than we did competitively with one another. And as Nancy mentioned, we all became fast friends on the board as we went forward to advance at that time what the goals and the programs and the membership benefits were for the section on orthopedics.
Babette?
Yeah, I would have to agree, and I go back again to what I said a little bit before. Was it because I was young and almost too naive to recognize what was happening? And that is certainly a possibility. I was young in age, fairly new as a graduate. I mean, certainly under 8 years, I guess, at that point. And so it may have been going on all around me, and I just was like clueless. And I'm willing to say that now, because now I'll pick it up like where'd that come from? Like, who's saying that? Why are they saying that? That's wrong, Whereas then I'm not sure I would have done that, or I was in so much awe of some of the leaders at the time. They were the people who wrote my textbooks. They were the people who were teaching the courses I was taking, that perhaps the awe and the naivety at that point didn't help me see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, there certainly is a different level of awareness these days compared to decades ago. Part of the purpose of these conversations is to look at some of the events and challenges the section was facing back in the formative years. And Babette, I'll start with you in terms of your time on the board in particular. What were the major challenges? What were the major priorities? I know back in the late 70s, early 80s, our priority was to kind of get the internal house in shape, policies, procedures, and bylaws, and developing a strong relationship with APTA. So what were the major issues driving activities back in your term as treasurer?
I would agree. Getting our internal house in order. As you said, we were still relatively young as a section. And so I think at the point that I was on the board, we had sort of emerged out of our infancy, but hadn't quite gotten to adolescence yet. So we were trying to figure out what we really wanted to be when we grew up as a section, and how that was going to happen. But I think that two of the things that I remember with people who are still leaders is talking about specialization. We didn't necessarily call it that, but that's what it was. And the seeds towards getting specialization as a reality started in the orthopedic section at that point. Establishing the journal, JOSPT, started in a board meeting where somebody said, we need to move beyond some newslettery kind of thing if we really want to promote. We moved, as a seed idea at one of our board meetings. I can remember distinctly who made the comments that said, we need to move beyond. If we want to promote research in orthopedic physical therapy, we need to have a place where people can publish their research. And so the seeds for the development of the journal came out of those early board meetings. So when I think now, the impact of JOSPT on the profession is enormous. When I think now about specialization, not just in orthopedics, but in a variety of clinical practice areas, it's enormous. And I take pride in the fact that I was part of those very early discussions.
Yeah. Jen, how about you? Not only just your terms as president, but when you started on the program committee, what were the big priorities and challenges at that time?
As I think back, there were three major challenges that we ran into. A minor one being who was going to work the lights as program committee, but we already found that volunteer. So I'll talk more about my 2 terms as president, because within the very first week of having been elected, I received a call from the American Board of Physical Therapy Specialists, the ABPTS, telling me that we had petitioned for the examination in orthopedics and our time was running out. We had basically 60 days to finish the exam to get to them so that they could take a look at it in September at their meeting. And our item writing group had resigned, so we didn't have anyone at the time. I reached out to Joan McCulloch, Rick Ritter, and Susan Stralka, and asked them if they would consider being the new members with a very short time frame of about 45 to 60 days. We brought them in to a central location for a week's worth, and they did yeoman work on that item, the items for the examination for the OCS, and completed that task, which had lingered for years and years because there at that time was the thought that there was going to be a practical component to the written component. So we owe them a great debt to have been able to get that done within that time period, because otherwise we were going to have to start the whole process over and go back to the petition process. So they came through and did an excellent job with that. The other challenge was really looking at our financial stability. We were the largest component of the APTA at that time, component being both sections and chapters. We did have thousands of members at that time, but we were totally, for the most part, reliant on dues revenue for our operating budget. So we wanted to look at how we were going to get beyond that and start to generate and plan for non-dues revenue. And we were very fortunate to not only do that to the tune of when I took the presidency, our operating budget was about annually was about $220,000. And when I left the presidency in 1992, it was 1.3 million plus. So the board was very successful in doing that. And one of the ways that we did that was by looking at special interest groups, or what we called SIGs. There was more to the orthopedic section than just manual therapy. And there were people who were interested in other subspecialty areas of orthopedics. The first SIGs were the occupational health SIG. Then we had foot and ankle. We had the performing arts SIG. We had pain management. And in 1992, I believe, the idea for animal physical therapy started that SIG. So we were able to expand beyond the initial focus of what the orthopedic section was, which was at that time predominantly mobilization and manual therapy, to other specialty areas that were inclusive of MSK, as well as pain management and other arenas that physical therapists practiced in. And then lastly, the last challenge that we really had to take charge of, if you will, was the whole area of practice restriction and practice protection. We were doing manual therapy, we were doing mobilization, we were doing manipulation, but our state practice acts didn't reflect that. And so we became in adversarial conversations with the chiropractors across the country who wanted to be not only restrictive about manipulation, but also to be able to say that they were doing physical therapy, because physical therapy really was not a protected term at that time. So we worked for years on being able to get the chapters or talk to the chapters about changing their state practice acts so that the protection of our practice was actually spelled out in those practice acts from state to state.
Yeah. Jan, you mentioned the financial growth of the section, and Babette talking about there was no office and no office staff, and you were involved. Jan, it was during your tenure that the section started putting away money to purchase land and build a building in La Crosse at a time when I'm not sure there was any other component or APTA that owned their own building. So can you describe a little bit of that background information related to that?
Well, after we started to develop programs that were revenue generating and were not reliant on membership dues, we started really banking a lot of the money into savings with the intent that we were going to purchase land and then we were going to build a building, because rent was basically not as fiscally beneficial to us as owning our own land, owning our own building. And we had John Wadsworth and Bob Burles, who were very financially astute too, who helped us grow those non-dues revenue to the the level that we could actually go out, start searching for land in the La Crosse area, and then think about actually building a building. It became very important to us once we actually had that up and running, because then we actually subcontracted our services in other areas to other sections. And that additionally brought in non-dues revenue, not just from the post-baccalaureate educational programs that we were doing, such as by that time the review course for the OCS examination, but also looking at the royalties from the journal, and then looking at the subcontracting of administrative and managerial services for the smaller sections that were having difficulty with the ability to purchase, if you will, expertise, both for things such as their newsletter as well as just event planning and meeting planning on their behalf.
Very good. Nancy, how about you? Looking at your years as vice president and also as education committee co-chair, what were the big events, major challenges facing the section at that time?
So two things, and I love what Babette and Jan have mentioned, and that was sort of on my list as well. But I think just to add to that, when I look back on that time, there was so much growth going on in the section. There was a growth in membership and broader interest, as Jan mentions, with the special interest group, but also growth in revenue and the importance of strong leadership to manage that growth wisely. And I think that the purchase of the building, as well as the development of infrastructure for the organization, it's really important as an organization goes from being a little, as Babette said, a checkbook in the trunk of the car, to a significant organization that needs really wise leadership to really build the infrastructure so that there would be a base to grow on forward. Something that I think is, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk about this further too, that continuing in with our base in La Crosse allowed us to have the consistency of staff. I was looking at the website this morning and realizing that Terry and Tara and Sharon have all been there for over 30 years, over 35 years in many cases, and you never see that, but to see the impact of that on the organization. And it was, I think, that wise use of, we really should be in La Crosse, even though it's not, in the DC area, to be able to do what we can for our members. And they have helped us show that that's really possible by providing the membership services that we need to keep the membership high.
Yeah, the stability of having those three on staff for all those years has been a huge plus. Nancy, maybe you can speak a little bit to the research side of things, kind of tying your role on the Ortho, the section board, and also your role with the foundation. The Rose Award started during Jan's tenure, and the section started funding research. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a great point, that the financial resources of the organization allowed the section to be a leader nationally. And I think that the Rose Award and then those early investments that the Ortho section made in the foundation, recognizing that it was important to funnel those resources into the foundation nationally to help the whole profession, allowed the Ortho section to, not necessarily have a seat on the board, but to have that influence, that we had early involvement in that, and were able to, to move into board positions. And Bill and I both served on the foundation board as well as chair of the board 4 times. And I think that having that bridge sort of made us realize what an important part we were of the larger body of research for physical therapy. And I think that those contributions in terms of leadership and in terms of dollars has made a big difference, and is still very visible today. And the fact that Stanley and Catherine got involved with some of their investments also, I think that has really secured a place for orthopedic research in the national body of knowledge.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Babette, come back to you. Can you describe any behind the scenes, humorous, surprising events that we would never glean from reading minutes in the newsletter or, the business meeting? Anything that you're willing to share?
Um, wow, that's a great question. And I think the most humorous thing for me right now really is to think back on what those early board meetings were like, what the atmosphere was. I think when you're sitting around a board table, so to speak, you tend to be much more business oriented. You have a job to get done. When you're sitting on beds in a hotel room, on the floor, on the desk chair, on the whatever, and there are 10 people, it's a much less formal, I would say, board meeting. And so you're much more likely to joke around, to pass, make comments that are not specific. And so it's specific to the job that needs to get done. And so I have to think back to the culture again as almost humorous as to where we are today. And I think to me that's the irony is with so little we accomplish so much and have continued to accomplish so much as an academy. Um, I am far from being actively involved in orthopedic practice at this point, even in a broad context. And so my focus of clinical care actually at some point switched from orthopedics to acute care. Um, but I have certainly taught for a long time and always told or encouraged our students who went, oh, do I have to do an acute care or rotation? Blah, blah, blah. All I want is to be an outpatient PT, is that they will be a much better, having worked in outpatient, knowing what outpatient care was like, that in fact you are a much better outpatient physical therapist if you have had exposure to acute care. Because when we talk about our role as primary care providers in direct access, when you've done acute care, when somebody who is sick walks into your clinic, you recognize it and you know to stop and take a different course of action than to purely approach whatever their orthopedic concern is. And so I very much switched, but I remain a section or academy member today because I believe in what the academy has done and continues to do. So the academy has influenced my life in many ways and really set me on the path. I moved from New York to Chicago. We had the study group, and those early leadership roles, I believe, really helped me learn more about leadership and gave me the confidence that I could be a leader and helped me continue to seek roles that met my needs to develop as a leader, but I think also met the association's needs and the profession's needs in a variety of different ways. And I've been able to use what I learned through both my academy service and my service to APTA in outside of physical therapy. And I think, and I can look back to some of those outside experiences and say they've absolutely come because of what I developed through APTA.
Very good. Jan, how about you? Behind the scenes things?
Behind the scene things were uh, always a good time and great memories. We worked hard, but we also played hard. And wanting to get a team that was partnering with each other, being very collaborative, as I said, versus competitive, was benefited by what we did outside of our board meetings. We, as I said before, worked very hard those first few years to get the OCS exam in place. Our first exam was in 1989, and 26 people passed that exam. But by 1992, we had 185 OCS specialists within the country. We had the land, we had the financial stability, and so we did fun things after the meetings were over. We always usually went to lacrosse and stayed at the same hotel in the same location, but we'd go out for dinner. And then I thought that it might be fun for us to start, from a competitive perspective, bowling competition. So we would go bowling and have individual teams that played against each other. And it was fascinating to see how people embraced that opportunity, whether you were a good bowler or a horrific bowler. People would come with hats, they'd come with shirts. If they didn't have shirts, they'd make up shirts. And we always had a very good time. If there wasn't the opportunity to do something like go bowling, we would go shopping. And the men were just as interested in going shopping as the women were. I remember an evening where Bill Grady and I went shoe shopping, and we still talk about that activity very fondly as we think about what we did. But those were the good memories. There were hard times, but as I said, we worked hard for the good of the orthopedic section and the members that we were serving, but we also played hard. And I think that's important. That's why doing things that provide networking opportunity and team building opportunities within boards and within even just the membership in general is so important. And I'd like to see that we continue to do face-to-face and in-person types of activities, not just always electronic Zoom opportunities with one another.
Nancy?
Yeah. Okay. So I have one story, and she may not want me to tell it, but I will anyway, and you can leave it in or not. So one of my favorite orthopedic section stories, this is my Catherine Patla story, and then we were in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, for the conference, and our board meeting was in the Lake Minnetonka room, and Catherine came in late because she had taken a cab 2 hours away to Lake Minnetonka to the board meeting. And so then she got there and she says, "Where's Ortho Section?" She says, "No, you're at Lake Minnetonka." So she had to take a 2-hour cab back to the board meeting. And so I think forever and ever since, Terry and Tara and Sharon have always put Lake Minnetonka room or Lake Michigan room next to the board meeting location. So because of Catherine logically making that little mess and giving all of us lots and lots of laughs. And then also along the Paris Patla line, I have such fond memories of cheering on Stanley Paris in all of his wonderful Renaissance man ventures that he did to keep us entertained, his channel swims and his sails and all of the different things that he was involved in, and how the not only the academy and the ortho section, but the foundation and all supported him in those ventures, and just gave us an interesting friend to follow throughout his life. It was lots of fun. And finally, I do remember shopping with Jan, and that was quite an experience. I've never done anything quite like that since. So thank you, Jan, for showing me how to shop for shoes.
Power shopping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, power bowling and power shopping, right?
When you have limited time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jan carried the bowling theme to the APTA board when I was on the APTA board. And I moved a few years ago when we downsized, and I still had my APTA bowling shirt. And I was like, do I need to move this? Well, maybe I should save it because I could use it as a costume sometime or something. And then I was like, no, you don't need to move this. It's okay. You know, you have all those memories of bowling with the APTA board. And I didn't realize it started with the Ortho Section board. So
I still have my APTA shirt too, Babette. I can't give it up.
well,
Yeah, my first Ortho Section experience at a board meeting, Janice, when you were president, I think it was on the nominating committee. And, I didn't really know about the social events, but we went bowling. And, being from Wisconsin, we bowl a lot. I think, I'm going to like this group.
You already had a shirt with your name on it, right?
Plenty of shirts. Yes, that's right. That's right. Oh, very good. Great stories. Thinking about future leaders and within the academy and beyond, what recommendations would you have for individuals and women in particular who might be interested in pursuing leadership within the academy, based on your experiences, within the academy and beyond? Babette, we'll start with you. What recommendations might you give to our early career folks?
I guess two things. Find something that you're passionate about or even think you might be passionate about. Don't say yes to things that you have no desire to be involved, but think you ought to say yes. Find something that you're passionate about so that you will continue to grow that passion and use that energy for potentially other roles. And the other thing that I would say to anyone, if you have family involved, make sure your family is involved in helping to make the decision so that you have the time and the support to do what you will need to do to be successful. I think it is very hard, particularly for women who are young mothers as well, that if you do not have support somehow, somewhere, that it is very difficult to make that extra step and be successful and have a good experience with that. And a story I'll share, when I went onto the APTA board, there are two stories. One is the first time I won, just like Jan said, her daughter asked, "Where's the crown?" When I called home to say I won, my daughter wanted to know, what did I win? Because people win cars and TVs and houses. And my husband said, "Well, Mommy won more trips away from home." So that was his response. Okay. But when she was young and I'd say I was going, I'd get the, "Mommy, do you have to go away? Why you do?" And we worked through that. By the time I went off the board, we were sharing a car. And then I got the, "Hey, Mom, when are you leaving? Can I help you pack?" Because when I wasn't there, the car was hers.
Right.
And so you go through stages. You have to really consider, but make sure that you do have support, but find something that you think you can be passionate about. So whatever you've said yes to doesn't become a burden. It becomes an exciting opportunity. And never slam a door completely shut. You never say never.
Jan, how about you? What recommendations would you give our future leaders?
I'm a big advocate in mentors and searching out mentors. The DPT students at both Slippery Rock University and Duke University, we really advocated for them to find a mentor. And it doesn't always have to be someone in the profession, but if it is, it tends to be a little bit more helpful. So whether you're a woman, you don't always need a female mentor, or a man doesn't always need a male mentor, but seek out a mentor, because it's something that you can glean from them through the mistakes that they have made, and they will help you over those challenges, obstacles, opportunities. They'll oftentimes be able to recognize an opportunity for you that you wouldn't even consider because you don't think you have the skill set. They might see that skill set in you, and it just has to be developed and nurtured and embraced. So a mentor should push you beyond a little bit beyond your limits or your comfort zone. And once you've crossed that comfort zone and you're in the area of the unknown, that's when they're there to support you and to help you and to work as a sounding board for you. It's always helpful if they're in the same meetings with you or in the same at the same conference with you, because they can open doors to people that you may not know, and they can make those introductions. But on the other hand, if they're a good mentor, they might also see you respond or react in a meeting in a way that they have suggestions for you as to how you might change that for the future, knowing who the other people within that board are and based on the experiences that they have had, because you always want to have people embrace a vision and to such a point where they take it as part of their own, because then they'll work hard to support that vision. And oftentimes that can depend on relationships. A good leader is a person who listens more than talks. And if they listen to what the other people are saying to them, then they can plan better for as to how to engage those other individuals to make sure that everyone's on the same path to moving the goal forward for the best outcome. But I would always recommend to find a mentor. Sometimes the mentor will reach out to you, but if they don't, go ask someone if they would consider having a formal mentorship relationship with you or even informal. Just would they be willing to sit down for a cup of coffee with you and have the opportunity to chat about certain things? But you will learn exponentially from having the opportunity to develop that relationship and have a mentoree relationship, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, mentoring, a powerful tool for sure. Nancy?
So I love what Annette and Jen have said, and those are really important. I think people have to find their own way, but basically it's show up, offer to help, do what you say you're going to do, and be somebody that people can count on, because you don't realize how rare that is. You know, people are always wanting to sort of be in the spotlight a bit, but to be able to do what you say you're going to do, and and show up, and there's just a lot that gets you 90% of the way.
Very good. Really good advice. Good recommendations. All right, so we'll do one last round robin here. Kind of final thoughts, looking back on your association with the section/academy. Final thoughts, fondest memories, maybe any regrets that you may have had. Babette, start with you.
I don't think so. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity that early in my career, because I really believe that it got my feet on the ground, helped me see my ability to contribute to a board, and really helped launch a long and very fruitful, for me, and hopefully for the profession and the association, relationship, and many other leadership opportunities and growth opportunities. So I don't have any regrets. The one thing I learned was that being a treasurer was not my forte. I did not enjoy being a treasurer, and perhaps now I would, because a treasurer's role in most of the academies or even chapters is a much more global role of influencing how dollars are obtained and spent versus balancing the checkbook. But that's one thing I've never done in all my other APTA roles is I've never been a treasurer again. So you learn from doing, and you learn from what you don't want to do in the future. So I have no regrets at all.
Yeah. Jan, fondest memories, final thoughts?
I likewise do not have any regrets. I would do it all again and hopefully be better at it for all the experience that I know now that I didn't know then. I have two fondest memories, most wonderful memories of my time with the orthopedic section, and that is the opportunity in 1988 to have been able to develop the Black Tie Roses event and recognize and honor Dr. Stephen J. Rose for all of his contributions as the first recipient of that award. He unfortunately passed away the following year, but that Black Tie Roses event continued on for many, many years, and we were able to recognize all of the contributors in our profession who were making great advances and gains in the area of research for the orthopedic section. So that was very helpful. My second fondest memory was the fact that the APTA had started a small minority scholarship fund. And after a year or two, I think they only had about $500 worth of contributions. And we brought the idea to the board to do a minority scholarship orthopedic challenge. And that was if within 12 months, if the minority scholarship committee for the APTA could raise $10,000, the orthopedic section would match that $10,000. And it was fascinating to see how the other sections, how the other chapters really embraced that challenge and helped them to raise not only the $10,000, but exceed that. And then we gladly matched the $10,000 at the end of the year. And that really helped to kick off the minority scholarship on a much more solid and financial basis to recognize minority students going forward to be great physical therapists.
Very good. And Nancy?
Okay. Is my internet okay? Can you hear me okay still?
Yes.
Okay. It just looked like it was being a little spotty. So I have spent the last 15 years on the staff side of nonprofits. And before that, I spent 15 or 20, 30 years on the member side of nonprofits. And I'd just like to give a little shout out to the importance of the staff in keeping this organization going. I remember years ago when I was in the program committee and we all thought we were doing all the work because we were getting the speakers and we were showing up and we were being nice dollar friends and all of that. And I remember Tara getting up and she said, "I'll be back. I'm going to count the brownies." It's like, "What? You count the brownies?" She said, "Yes, because sometimes they don't give us enough and I've got to count the sodas and I've got to do all of this stuff." And it's like, there is a whole world that goes on under that. And I think with the orthopedic section, the financial management, the investment management, the staff management that Terry does and the planning and the strategy and working with all the vendors and all of that, that it's so great to have an organization that's had that sort of longevity with their staff that have kept this going and that allows all of us to feel like that we're doing such a great job because they're keeping the boat going behind us. And I just want to, at this 50th anniversary, give a shout out to them who have, been there almost as long as the organization has been around. And I appreciate my friendships with them. They took care of my babies when I would bring them in to lacrosse at our meetings, and I've watched them raise their children, and I'll become grandparents and all of that. So it's been a joy to know them, and I think we're all better off for their great contributions and their many hours of service.
Yeah.
Kudos to staff.
We're much better off. Yes. Oh, that's great insight. Again, thank you for making time to do this today. And, on behalf of the Academy, thank you for all your contributions over the decades that really helped shape the organization. And as we mentioned early on, just even beyond into the profession. And you mentioned some other names of women in particular who assumed important leadership roles. You mentioned Carolyn Wadsworth, who was secretary back in the late 70s, early 80s, and then was the fifth president of the organization. Dorothy Santee, who was secretary in the mid to late 70s, then on the finance committee and served as treasurer in the 1990s. I mean, her role spanned the first 25 years. Nid Iglarsh, also, who was the president after you, Jan, also had a big role in the education committee beforehand. So there's been a number of women who've made a huge impact on this organization. And thank you for the three of you for representing them so well today. So good luck. And that ends our recording. So Jimmy, you're still there.
Well, thank you, Bill. We appreciate that. And